Dear students, welcome to the course Introduction to Metaphysics of Sanskrit Language. Today we are going to begin our lecture 8, and in the last lecture we have already gone through the physical aspects of, as I have mentioned that in unit 2 we are going to have an introduction to the components of language Sanskrit, because the course is oriented towards the language Sanskrit. So, we have already gone through the physical aspects, dhvani, akshara, varna, then shabda, then pad and then ukti. Then I just started the metaphysical aspects, which is the target of the course. So, today we are going to discuss all these aspects one by one. So, first is language and reality, that is satta. So, first of all you need to have this understanding that satta is not equal to the understanding of politics. ठीक है, यहाँ राजनीति की सत्ता की बात नहीं हो रही. ठीक है, सत्ता word comes from sat. Sat is the root, and then we are making some suffixes, specifically tal, which will create a word of striling, and then it will be satta. So, as you are not familiar with the suffixes or prefixes in detail in the language Sanskrit, so I am skipping that, but there is some kind of additional inflectional marker to create the feminine word satta. But the word, the root, the mula shabda is a sat, and sat can be equated with isness or existence. जो कुछ भी अस्तित्व में है वो सत्य है. Whatever is existing, that is sat. Doesn't matter it is within or the reach of our senses or not. Doesn't matter, right now we are not able to perceive so many viruses and bacteria in this class surrounding us. That doesn't mean that they are not in existence, right? So, it doesn't matter how sophisticated apparatus of cognition we have, satta always remain the same. हम देख सकते हैं या नहीं ये हमारी क्षमता है, और अगर हम या हम में से कोई और जीव नहीं देख सकता कोई चीज़, तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि वो चीज़ अस्तित्व में नहीं है. That's why सत्ता denotes isness, होने का भाव. ठीक है, existence. So, first of all, what is the relationship between existence and language? We are going to understand that relationship. इन दोनों के बीच में क्या संबंध है, कैसे, how these both of these entities are linked with each other. So, in literature of Sanskrit language, the thought on the language is very deep, and this thought says that language is not only the means of communication. First question of your mid-semester examination, second question I think, what is language, and first topic of our course, what is language. So, in our discourse, in our textual understanding, in our behavioral understanding also, language is not only the means of communication, but it creates the reality. It not only describes the reality, but it creates the reality. And in that sense itself, we can divide the reality in 3 categories. Because first we are going to understand what satta is, what reality is, and then only we can understand how language is linked with it. So, satta or reality is classified, or it is understood in Indian understanding as of 3 types, 3 possible types. First is Pārmārthika, that means transcendental. Second is Tāttvika, ontological, and third is Pratyayānta or virtual. So, what is Pārmārthika, what is Tāttvika and what is Prātibhāsika? बहुत आसानी से समझना है in very simple sentences, so that you will be able to comprehend it. So, I will take the examples from your own knowledge, that much of knowledge you are having right now. You all are familiar with the games, virtual realities. क्योंकि ये तो आप लोगों की रोज़ की ज़िंदगी है ना, तो आपको पता है. In virtual reality, in a gaming software, what you are actually doing? You are participating, you are playing with another so many 3, 2, 4, 5, 6 multiple persons, but you know that that is a virtual thing, right? In a gaming software, in a gaming application, क्या कर रहे हो? 5, 6, 7 लोग, multiple people are playing there. There are multiple things. You are perceiving them. You are getting engaged yourself with them. But the truth is, the original doer is you. Nobody which is available here or in that particular application is in existence in real. आप जानते हैं कि वो virtual है, right? Because you have created that kind of application, so you are very much familiar with the virtual reality. Virtual reality में कोई भी real चीज़ नहीं है. You are yourself getting engaged, and then you are, and also you are knowing that you are the real one, they are not the real ones, they are the virtual ones, right? So virtual reality is just like that. When we are the original doers, but we create it in our own form. That can be just a part of our imagination also. When you maintain that imagination in a kind of artificial screen, that becomes a gaming software application, right? And you are familiar with that. So virtual reality वो है जिसमें actual doer is you. That means your conscious brain, your conscious existence is the real doer, and rest of everything is just the manifestation of it in diverse forms, not in a single one. No one, not even a single image which is actually playing in that game is just like you in your appearance or in your intelligence or in any other attribute, right? So you are manifesting yourself in a virtual mode, but in multiple forms, and they are diversified forms. So this is happening always with us, and the same is applicable for our own existence. In reality, you all are different. Right now, what I can say that each student is different from the other one. You all are having multiplicity, differentiation, different attributes. But in reality, you are, or we all are, just the virtual realities. We all are just the virtual realities of some transcendental reality who is the original doer. And that original doer is only one. That is consciousness. That is the level of peak point of our own existence, that is energy itself, but not that kind of energy or inert energy who doesn't know herself. That kind of energy who is intelligible, that is intelligible energy, is a peak point of transcendental understanding from whom every kind of multiplicity arises or appears on the canvas, and that becomes a kind of virtual reality with differentiation and with multiplicity in the attributes. So all the animals, all the plants, whatever diversity we are having right now, we are perceiving right now in our surroundings, that is just the manifestation of that transcendental reality who is only one, that intelligible energy where that is only one. So in Indian context, first of all, what is the basic difference between translating the word Shakti and energy? Difference hai. In the sciences, we have never trained to understand energy as an intelligible one who is knowing oneself. कभी ऐसा सोचा है? Suppose you are standing in front of a mirror. Have you ever thought about it that mirror is knowing that who is getting reflected within me? No. Mirror, we find that mirror is a non-living substance, and that doesn't know who is actually being reflected in that mirror. But when we see others, we know ourselves, we know the other persons also. So we are intelligible. We have the knowledge about our own existence also and the other ones also. So that's the difference between the energy and intelligible energy. When we talk about Shakti principle of life, that is intelligible energy. That's why I am using the word as at the peak point, the intelligible energy is our transcendental or Pārmārthika satta. And when that energy, unified one, gets reflected in to manifest or to give the appearance to the multiple differentiations, that becomes virtual reality or Pratyayānta satta. So क्या प्रतिभासित हो रहा है वो वर्चुअल हो गया, क्या वास्तविक है वो ट्रांसेंडेंटल है. Now there is one entity which is in between, that is ontological. In the last lecture I told you, suppose we consider this as an object, so there must be an observer, perceiver, and there must be some mode or means of cognition through which the perceiver perceives that object. So the object becomes ontological reality. That is third one, the in between, ontological reality. When we consider something as the object of knowledge or object of cognition or the object to be known, that becomes ontological reality. So suppose any बुद्धिमान व्यक्ति, सुमेधी और सुमेधा शील पुरुष, मनुष्य, पुरुष means स्त्री पुरुष नहीं है, पुरुष means the one who is the dweller of this city, that is पुरी शरीरे वसति अनेन इति पुरुषः. I will explain in detail. Purush is defined as Puri Sharire Vasati. And what is Puri? Just like Dwarika Puri, Jagannath Puri, Lakshman Puri, and so many Puris we have. So Puri means city, Nagar. And Puri Sharire, that means Sharir is a kind of city. Someone is residing here. In this gross structure, someone is residing, and that who is residing is Purusha. That means your consciousness is Purusha. So Purusha Shabda is not related with the gender. स्त्री पुरुष नहीं है उसका अर्थ. पुरुष का मतलब है चेतना, consciousness. So here what is being understood, when we start understanding our own existence, when we make our own existence as the object to be known, that becomes the ontological reality. So हमने सत्ता को अपने अध्ययन का विषय बना दिया, तो उससे हमने ontological reality बना दिया. So anything when becomes a kind of object to be known, that becomes ontological. So here reality is becoming an object to be known. That's why the third category is Tāttvika, that is ontological reality. And the best example you can see on the screen, like when there are ripples in the ocean, in this sentence, what is happening? The ontological reality is water, because jal tattva एक ontological category है. We want to know what is jal. It is H2O or something else. We investigated about it, right? We got the formula for it, and our chemistry, physics, everything is having that understanding. So it became an ontological reality. Okay. Now what is happening? In this ocean, there are ripples. यही लिखा है ना? There are ripples in the ocean. So in the same water of the ocean, ripples are present, and these ripples are just the virtual reality. Why? Because they are understood separately just because of the use of language. If you don't use the language, if you don't use any word like ripple, you won't become able to understand that ripple is in existence. So the existence of ripple is just because of the use of the word ripple. This is how language is potent enough to create the reality. एक virtual reality आपने create कर दी. कैसे? Just इसलिए कि क्योंकि आपने लहर शब्द का प्रयोग कर लिया. Just you used that particular word, you created another reality which is a kind of virtual one, in that same ontological category, that is water. Okay? And what is ocean? Samudra kya tha? The original transcendental reality which is very grand in existence, whose limitations may not be measured. कभी कभी वो सकता, that's why in the last lecture I told that we cannot measure out a kind of entity whose topmost limit is limitless with a limited instrument or a limited scale. Okay, we cannot measure limitless entity with a limited measuring instrument. So when we talk about Pārmārthika satta, that becomes such a grand in existence, such a grand existence itself, which is limitless. So it's unmeasured, it can't be measured, right? So it is the Pārmārthika satta. This is the example to give you the understanding about the reality. And this kind of reality is coming into existence just because we are using words like lahar, like ripples, etc., etc. So many of the ripples. So in a very short understanding, if I want to address all of us, we are Chaitanya. Chetna का स्वरूप है, conscious entities हैं, we are consciousness. But if I want to address each and every name of every individual, it is a Pratyayānta satta. So differentiation and multiplicity is Pratyabhāsik. It's not real one. The reality is everyone, every manifested entity is just Chaitanya, just consciousness itself. So this is how our language creates the reality and also describes the reality. Once it describes, automatically it creates differentiation. This is how both the things go parallel. I told you in the last lecture, we have to understand this relationship, how both are linked together. Existence itself becomes available to us just because we use the language. So language creates the reality, simultaneously provides differentiation and multiplicity. This is how both are linked. And in the same scenario, transcendental reality is always empirical. That's why I told you we cannot measure limitlessness with a limited instrument. So we have to experience it. And experiential things can never be written into the Shastras. They are always have to be understood by you, practiced by you, applied by you, by us. जब तक हमने खुद उसका प्रयोग नहीं किया, हमें पता नहीं चलेगा. Just like I told you, there are so many popular known roads to reach to PPA. But even after knowing all those paths, you cannot identify that there is no other way along apart from those available popular paths. उनके अलावा और कोई रास्ता नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं कहा जा सकता. Maybe you would be able to create your own shortcut to reach that particular destination, even after knowing so many of the paths, popular paths. So that's why empirical knowledge is very important, experience based knowledge is very important for the Shastras, and that's why we have para knowledge. कहा था ना, we have two types of knowledges, Paravidya, Aparavidya. Aparavidya has all the Shastras, they all indicate you how to reach to your destination. But the journey needs to be undertaken by you, that is your Paravidya. From this only, we can move to the next one, that is the Mantrātmaka and Prapañcātmaka. I have already explained a lot of the things related with it, but right now we are going to enter much deeper space. First is the language of thought which occurs at the time of self-dialogue and contemplation. Self-dialogue is antaha samvada, a talk with oneself, and contemplation means dhyana. You are focusing inwardly and talking to yourself. So this happens at the level of your thoughts. Suppose you are alone in your room and you are trying to find out a solution for some problem you are facing, and you are talking to yourself. So in that case क्या होता है, in many of the acts or plays also you must have seen, like we talk to ourselves, then in televisions also or in videos must have seen, like there is someone who talks, and when the people ask like who are you, मैं तुम्हारी आत्मा हूँ, I am your inner being. So who is there to talk to you? You are. Only you are there, no one else. So we are in talk with ourselves, and there is no duality. There are no two people involved. So अब आप बताइए, what is the actual definition of language? Language is a means of communication. बचपन से रटाया गया है. Language is not only just a means of communication, because communication happens only in between the two. When there is no two, तब क्या हो रहा है? Duality doesn't exist at that point. Only you are who is asking a question, who is getting the answer. Then again asking the question, then again getting the answer. And in that sense, a lot of times, especially in your examination hall, you should remember your faces. The invigilator is very well knowing what is happening. Who is actually contemplating, क्या था याद नहीं आ रहा. किससे बात कर रहे हैं आप? You are trying to contemplate, you are trying to remember the things, recollect the things, and keep talking to yourself, just to recollect the things which are already inside of you, and which have either slipped out of your mind, or you in panic or in anxiety you just forgot to how to write them at that particular instance. So you are trying to just contemplate or recollect that knowledge which is already inside of you. You are keep on engaging yourself, talking to yourself, and then either you get the answer or you just forget it. And sometimes very interestingly it happens when you just submit your paper, answer script, immediately you recollect the answer. क्लास से आते ही बाहर आपको याद आ जाएगा कि ये था. Why it happens? Because of nervousness, anxiety, panic, you just forgot. You just your bhavas of negative energy were so dominating that you were not able to recollect at that particular point of time. So this happens always when we try to find out the solutions, not only in our knowledge oriented sources or practices, in our real life also. Sometimes you are in a conflict. What should be done? You are facing a lot of problems and you are in a dharma sankat. Dharma sankat means topmost level of conflict. When you don't want to do something but you are forced to do something, you know that this is not right, but you have to do in some kind of pressure, then you are in a situation of highest possible conflict. What should be done? So you talk to yourself. You get a guidance from your inside, because then a lot of people claim like, I get the knowledge from my own inside. My sixth sense is saying to me that my gut feeling is like that if we go through this path, we will get the destination. How it's coming to us? It's coming just because we are having this potency of getting the knowledge from our inside. So this is antaha samvad. So language is not only the means of communication, it becomes communion with oneself. Communion with oneself. In the same way, just because of this concept, this potency, this power, what happens when language describes something to others? It creates different variations of the same ontological category like sky, water, fire, etc. And this is the main reason we have many synonyms in a language for describing the same ontological reality. And just like if you get a time to search about this information, like Eskimo people know more than 20 variations of the ice while the people of the high temperature area are not familiar with so many variations of the ice. हम बर्फ के लिए एक ही शब्द जानते हैं, but they are knowing so many variations. Why? Because they are habituated with, in their environment they have seen so many of the forms of the ice, but the ontological reality is same, ice. Thus the language becomes Prapañcātmaka, that means it becomes potent enough to describe the diversity or multiplication or differentiation. So this is Mantrātmaka and Prapañcātmaka. When we contemplate, we are engaged in a self-talk, the language becomes a part of thought structure, that is मनन क्षमता से जुड़ी हुई भाषा की क्षमता, मंत्रात्मक है. And the second part is Prapañcātmaka, describing the reality into multiple forms, Prapañcātmaka. Third is language as an ontological category. Language as an ontological category. Ontological means an object to be known. So the language in its original form is itself an ontological category, and the ontologic means the study of the object to be known. So language is itself an object of knowledge. And in the last lecture also I told you, language and consciousness both are similar in that form, both are object of knowledge also, both are means of knowledge also, instrument of knowledge also. We cannot perceive language through any other means other than the language itself. Once we start understanding the language as an object to be known, we get an immediate question of means of knowledge to know the language. Interestingly, language is that kind of object of cognition which can be known by the language itself. No other means of knowledge can lead us to know the language as an ontological reality or ontological category. This has been explained in the last lecture also. Now on the basis of these 3 points, what is the focus of our concern? हम इस course में क्या समझने वाले हैं? The focus of the course is on 3 aspects, that is Mantrātmaka, Prapañcātmaka and ontological. So language becomes a cognitive system when we deal with these three possible aspects. If one is talking to oneself, it means that one is not communicating with oneself, rather one is in communion with oneself. I explained it. One is one with oneself, and so it is not a transaction between the two, it is one, it is a communion. You are not communicating, you are in communion with yourself. So language is not just a means of communication, it is a more communion, and that is why it gives birth to thoughts, thought structure, and thus it becomes a cognitive system. What is cognitive system? An embedded intelligence. I explained in examination what we do. We try to use our embedded intelligence to recollect or to sort out the problems which are suddenly just in front of our eyes in the question paper. क्या हो रहा है? We are trying to use our embedded intelligence, that is cognitive system. So in turn, language is studied as a cognitive system, and this is what we are going to deal in this course. Now this is an intrinsic property of a language. What is possible intrinsic property of a language? Just like the intrinsic property of fire is what? Temperature. Yatra yatra agni tatra tatra ताप. ताप means temperature. आपको एक particular temperature मिलेगा. Inside of us also we are having a temperature. In this room also we are having the temperature. Each and everything which is available as a manifested entity is having a particular temperature, and that is the notion of presence of Agni Tattva, right? In the same way, language has the intrinsic property to successfully transmit the meaning of the word to the listener. That is why in communication there are two identities. You try your best to communicate your things to the others, but in case of self-talk, there is only one identity, and you try your best to communicate everything to yourself. So that's why self-guidance, guided by your own self, that is self-guidance. So here the meaning should be transmitted successfully, that's the intrinsic property of a language. जिसमें अर्थ को समझाने की क्षमता ना हो वो भाषा नहीं है. That's why we have sign language. Sign language में कोई भाषा बोलता है, कोई शब्द बोलता है? नहीं. This only symbols. What's happening? But it's still all the symbols are completely potent to communicate the meaning. अर्थ को संप्रेषित करने की क्षमता है. क्या कहना चाहता है वो आपको पता चल जाएगा. So it's also a kind of language. Understood? That's why we should now not be thinking like that language is a means of communication, nothing. This definition is incomplete definition, and we are not the sophisticated or superior most ones in the universe or the cosmos to possess a set of language, right? ये दोनों चीज़ें हमारा अपना misconception है, हमारा अपना अधूरा ज्ञान है. Okay? Now here what happens when we communicate either with oneself or with other? The procedure. In that process, you can see in the diagram itself, easily समझ लेंगे आप. Once you are reading a book, in the first case this is the cognizer and he is having one book, the object of cognition, that is book, right? And his senses are involved in reading that particular book. So consciousness is rushing out through the means of cognition, that is eyes, and then going back to his own, going back inside and then processing everything what is being written in the book. So this is the first stage. Now in the second stage there are two people. One is seeing page 3 of the book, object of cognition. Through, after seeing this page 3 of the book, he says or he thinks, first he thinks, thought क्या आ रहा है? He is having that thought, hey Ram, listen, this is written on the page 3 of the book. Okay? उसको पता चल चुका है, उसके thoughts में आ गया. Now the same thought is getting communicated through the speech to the other person. That person receives all the stimuli, शब्द ग्रहण कर लिया उसने. Now again the thought develops in the second person. Yes, I listened to you and now I know that this is written on page 3 of the book. This is the thought. Okay? And then again what is possible? He may say it or he may not say it. Both are the options available. Suppose you are in the class, you are instructed not to speak anything, be silent. So आप समझ गए, आपने बोला नहीं. Okay? जरूरी नहीं है कि आप response करें कि हाँ मिल गया. Fine. So this is one stage. In the next stage, you can see now what is happening. Thought, he is again the person is seeing the book 2 of the page and this is the object of cognition. The thought develops like, hey Mohan, please check on the page 2 of the book, I have a doubt here. The thought is there. Then he used the speech, he or she used the speech to communicate it, and the person heard it, received it, and then in the thought itself said as okay. Maybe he uttered or not uttered, that is up to the second person. ज़रूरी नहीं है कि हर चीज़ वैखरी में communicate की जाए. If we use the वैखरी वाड़ी, that means if we use the gross speech, maybe the second person, maybe the process is complete or maybe not, the process is not complete. We cannot say every time because receiving, responding goes on simultaneously and regularly. It happens always. So in this process, what is happening? What is notable here? The thought possessed in the mind of the speaker is without a sequence. Notice, this is the noteworthy point. Emphasize. I am emphasizing because you have to deal this concept in the later lectures. When the thought possessed in the mind of the speaker is without sequence, that is akrama. In Sanskrit we use akrama. Krama means a sequence, akram means without sequence. So when the thought possessed in the mind of the speaker is without sequence, this is the first stage. even in our thoughts, what is the sequence of the words we don't know until I speak the sentence. राम मोहन जाता है, राम जाता मोहन है. मुझे नहीं पता कि मैं जब विचार थॉट में हूँ तो ये सारे शब्द एक सीक्वेंस में अलाइंड हैं भी कि नहीं. We don't know. We don't know there is a sequence in the thoughts or not. So, in our understanding, the thoughts are having akramavadi. They are without sequence. But when it is conveyed to the listener through utterance by the speaker, it becomes a sakrama. Sa means with. That means with a sequence. When I will speak the same thing to you, I will put the words in a proper sequence to communicate successfully the meaning to you. Right? So, when it is uttered, it becomes a sakrama. When the heard thought is understood by the listener, understood, again the language becomes without sequence. I understood your thing, I kept it inside. Now it's gone. Where? Nobody knows. कहीं चला गया है और वो अब कैसा है, किस फॉर्म में है, उसमें क्रम है कि नहीं, कुछ पता नहीं है. So again it's gone somewhere which is where it is akrama. So sakrama and akrama is the transformation in the form of sequencing, and that is why the difference of the languages is always just in the krama structure. जैसे हिंदी, अंग्रेजी, संस्कृत and so many languages you take. In all the languages when we are being taught, क्या पढ़ाया जाता है? शब्द ये हैं, अक्षर ये हैं, शब्द ये हैं, वाक्य रचना ऐसे करनी है. That means in the sentence making we are being trained how to put the different types of things in a proper sequence so that the meaning can be communicated successfully. Right? किसी भी भाषा में हमें उल्टा वाक्य बोलना नहीं सिखाया जाएगा कि मीनिंग समझ ना आए. If you utter that kind of sentence, so the next person will say कुछ समझ नहीं आया, ऐसे बोलो कि मुझे समझ में आए. Right? This is why it happens, because in our thought structure everything is there and it is akrama, and that's the difference between the sign language and the languages we utter in Vaikhari. Between the languages of the creatures like birds. कोयल की आवाज़ सुनी है, बहुत मीठा गाती है. आपको पता है कौन सा गाना गा रही है? No. बट बहुत मीठा गाती है ये आपको पता चल रहा है. जब आपको गाना ही नहीं पता है तो आपको पता कैसे कि वो बहुत मीठा गा रही है? क्योंकि आप अक्रमा को अंडरस्टैंड कर रहे हैं. अक्रमा गेट्स रिलेटेड विद आवर थॉट्स. And whatever thought, whatever feel we are having, we will relate ourselves to that particular melody. So this is the difference. When you utter in the gross speech, that is dominated by sakrama. That's why जब आप emotionally कोई चीज़ communicate करते हैं तो आप कहते हैं ना, शब्दों पर मत जाओ, भाव को समझो. यही है भाव. That means you need to experience the feeling. No, words are not so important, but the experience is important, because feel is residing at akrama level and it's common to everyone. It's universal. The way you will experience sadness, the same experience will be the of other person. The way you experience the pain, the same will be the experience of the other person. So you relate yourself with others just because of your bhav structure. Your bhavas are your existence. इसीलिए कहा है पहली चीज़, भाव is not equals to emotions. Emotions वो हैं जो express हो जाते हैं. भाव express नहीं होते हैं. They are subtle. They are abstract. And second thing, भाव is not your weakness. बहुत सारे students नहीं, और भी not only students, a lot of people have this misconception that when we are having dominated by our bhavas, we are weak. No, your bhav is your existence. And if you consider your own existence as your weakness, how you are going to exist? Understand it very properly. सबसे पहले भाव को ट्रांसलेट मत करो, और दूसरा भाव आपकी कमज़ोरी नहीं है. This should be very clear throughout of your life. I am not teaching that kind of course which is restricted to the degree purpose. It is going to serve in the real purpose in your life. Now moving ahead, one next thing, that is verb centered language. What is verb centrality? This is the root cause because which we are dealing with this course. In Sanskrit, the language is verb centered. Verb centered. Verbs don't have physical existence while nouns are. Suppose I say जाता है, जा रहा है, so immediately you will say कौन जाता है, कौन जा रहा है, हमें तो कोई नहीं दिखाई दे रहा, because you need to see a noun. Noun has a physical existence. Verb don't have a physical existence, and that is why all the other constituents of the sentence revolve around the verb, and in Sanskrit we have the centrality of the verb. All the 6 cases, 3 genders and persons of many of the constituents of the utterances, they are decided according to the verb, like saha gacchati, sa gacchati, then te gachatah, saha tau gachatah, te gacchanti. So accordingly the utterances are decided according to the verb. Verb is in central position, but rest of everything will take the case, gender, etc. according to the verb. Verb is in centrality and verb doesn't have a physical existence. So that's why metaphysics of Sanskrit language is more important to be understood than the language itself, than the physical components of the language itself, and that is the purpose of this course, why we are right now understanding and dealing with this course. Next is just the summary of our special features, which are the special features of our Sanskrit language, and after these special features only we will enter into the metaphysical aspect, each of the metaphysical aspect one by one in detail. So summarizingly these things are presented here, so I will just explain everything through this chart. First feature, it is metrical. I explained you that we have approximately all the students have written the wrong answer because nobody watched the video before giving the mid semester examination. 5 words which are used to nominate Vedic corpus: Ved, Samhita, Chāndas, and 2 more. You have to identify from the previous lectures. Sort out करके रख लीजिए before the end semester comes. So what is metrical? That is Sūtra Baddha, Chāndas. It is arranged in a particular meter. And what is the metaphysical aspect? This is a feature. Language is metrical, and this metrical feature decides melody first of all. भाषा में बहुत मधुरता है. Just like I recited the quote, वाणी एका समलंकरोति पुरुषम या संस्कृता धार्यते. So there is melody in the language. When you use it, it never gives you unpleasant feeling. Second is beauty in the speech. That's why this saying is mentioning that a person when uses a perfect statement of utterances, then the person becomes more graceful. So this generates a beauty in the language. Melodical है because of the being meter bound in nature, it's melodical. And second, it enhances the beauty of a speech. And third, it creates very perfect creative literature. बहुत ज़्यादा abundance में, we have a very grand corpus of a creative literature just because of this metrical property. And you can see these characters much more in detail from this link, because this link is coming from the Rig Veda Shakal Samhita 10th Mandal Sūtra 114, and this is the link already available in the Vedic Heritage gov.in. The traditional scholars have already recited, and then that is kept by the government of India through a project. You should consult it whenever you get a time. You can actually feel this melody, beauty and creative literature just because of the metrical feature of the language. Second is figurative. Figurative is the feature. What it gives to us, metaphysical aspect. First, it gives metaphorical language. Metaphor is a kind of figure of speech. रूपक एक अलंकार है. रूपक, उपमा, उत्प्रेक्षा, I told in the previous lectures, these are the alamkāras. Just like we decorate ourselves through the different ornaments, in the same way our bhasha gets decorated through the alamkāras. So alankars are, one of the alankar is rupak, and in English we use metaphor for the word rupak. So it's metaphorical in understanding. Second is it's mystical, because metaphorism gives mysticism. Just like आपका चांद सा सुंदर चेहरा है. You are as beautiful as the moon is. What you do? You are just superposing two entities on each other. A face which is as beautiful as the moon. So you are superposing moon and face together on each other. So it's रूपक, आरोप कर देते हैं. We are superposing two entities. So this is, it gives mysticism also, because in Vedic language a lot of the things are superposed, and that's why I told you translation is not going to serve the purpose. Even if you are translating, you need to be a very good scholar in having an in-depth understanding of all the Vedangas very properly before you proceed to actually use or take over Vedic literature. Then sarcasm. Sarcasm, what is sarcasm? When you say something like tana marna, sarcastic in nature, that is also available in that case, in that thing. Like Vadi in Vakasukta itself, you can see Vadi is proclaiming herself, I am the one who convey everything for all of you, Sumedham, Rishim, सबको बता देती है. So a lot of sarcasm is there, because without me you can't do anything. So sarcastic in nature. And behavioral prescription. Here we have behavioral prescriptions, like in this, this is also a good example for understanding metaphorical understanding. This is the actual mantra from the Rig Veda. Suparnam viprah kavayo vachobhi ekam santam bahudha kalpayanti. What's the meaning? The wise rishis, through their praises, perceive into many forms the word who is only one. Now the one who is not trained enough in Alaṃkāra Shastra or in the Vedangas will translate it like this one. ठीक है? And an intelligent person who is understanding what the Vedic corpus is will be able to understand that this bird is not the ordinary chidiya. This is Paramatma. This is consciousness. What is this being said here? The original real entity, the intelligent principle, ultimate existence is one, and we are the multiple copies which are virtual in nature. So the actual meaning in the translations can only be conveyed when you are an actual real scholar of the Vedic corpus. This is the best example. Third feature is compound and assimilative. Samāsa Baddha है, compounding उसमें बहुत ज़्यादा है, and because of compounding we have very compressed manuscripts. Whenever you get a time to go any of the archaeological museums, you go for the ancient manuscripts, the section, very fine manuscripts, इतनी छोटी छोटी, कुछ तो ऐसी हैं कि आपको दिखाई भी नहीं दे. You can imagine how they created it, how they wrote in that manuscript. You can't even comprehend that much of labor कि आप तो उसको magnifying lens से देख रहे हैं, and those who have created it, those who have written it, how they wrote it, we cannot even comprehend. So very compressed manuscripts. A lot of the treasure is available and it is compressed in a very small set. Then dominancy of constituents of the spoken language. Spoken language dominate करती है because orality dominates, and uniformity in spoken and compositional language. It's not like we will write something else, we will say something else. ऐसा कहीं नहीं है. संस्कृत में whatever we say that would be written, and that's why Samāsa and Sandhiḥ do not exist as a part of written version of the language Sanskrit. They are the part of our speech. हम जब भाषा बोलते हैं तभी बहुत सारी साउंड्स फ्यूज होती हैं. Whenever we utter so many sentences, we fuse so many sounds, we may skip many of the words, so it becomes compounded, and that is the feature of speech or orality. That means oral version of language, and the same gets reflected in the text also. So whatever we speak, that is being written. First of all, आज से ही दिमाग से ये घटना निकाल दो कि भाषा बोली नहीं जाती थी. भाषा बोली जाती थी तभी उसकी मनुस्क्रिप्ट है, क्योंकि भाषा ही ऐसी नहीं है वो. Whatever we speak, that is being written. So the third is compound and assimilative, and here the example from the Rig Veda is available. Fourth one, it is highly coded. Adulteration is very difficult. Just like Ramaha Gacchati, I told you, we put the inflectional marker with the Moolva Shabda. So it gets fused with the inflectional marker. Now doesn't matter Ramaha Gacchati or Gacchati Rama. You can't adulterate it. Adulteration is very difficult because of its highly coded version. Then abbreviated, बहुत easily memorize हो जाती है. Just like in examination, before one day you created so many of the cheating chits, right? बहुत सारे लोगों ने किया होगा, बहुत मेहनत करते हैं बच्चे. But what happens there? Sometimes, just like for example, 64 allied sciences. Ma'am, we are not able to remember them. We create the quotes. Quotes. We can easily remember the quotes. And then we will write it like Mesh Kukkut Lavak Yuddha Vidhi. You made the code like M Mesh Kukkut Lavak Yuddha Vidhi. Abbreviation. So if in any book, when you start after index, you can see abbreviations. Abbreviations used in that book. What is abbreviation? You make the small versions of the symbols so that you can easily memorize them in the examination. You easily recollect them in the exam. So this is abbreviation. They are easy to memorize. Just like Chaitanya Mahatma, आसानी से याद रहेगा. And this is the Shiva Sutra. I recited the 14 Maheshwar Sutras. Very easily memorized. I memorized one time in my childhood. I am still recollecting it as fluent as it was. So because of that abbreviation, it is very easy to memorize. And next is generative, because it's having that kind of structure of grammar from which in which we can create number of words from the base root, Moola Shabda, and that is giving us the property of generation of infinite number of words whenever required. That's why it is forever relevant. Just like for mechanical engineering, we created the word Abhiyantriki. Abhiyantriki was not an allied sciences. क्या था शब्द? मूल शब्द for mechanical engineering in the 64 allied sciences. Vanished. Dhatuvadah, right? We created it right now, Abhiyantriki. This is a creation. This is a generation. In the same way, a lot of words can be generated. Last is usage based, because the authenticity lies in the speakers. And that's why it is complaint in all the modern Indian languages. We are borrowing all the words of the Sanskrit in all the Indian languages. And this is how the metaphysical structures of the Sanskrit dominate over the physical structures of the language. Right now also a lot of studies are going, but the original content is missing because they are completely focused on the physical aspects. Still they are in the physical ones, and we have already trespassed that thing in our own understandings. So for this lecture, this is sufficient. We will begin the unit 3 in the next lecture. Thank you.